Hello everyone, welcome back to our geometry class. This video we are going to practice several examples regarding how to use the two methods we introduced in the previous video about finding sector area. And in this video, as you can see, the calculator is on the side because we do need to use calculator to do some calculations. So before we start practicing the example, I just want to quickly go over the two methods we mentioned. The first one, we can use this one to find the sector area directly by substituting the value we know. And one thing we do need to remind you is the central angle is same as arc measurement. So it really depends on what measurement you know, but since they're equivalent, so you can either replace the value to whatever the situation you know. And for this one, as we can see, we consider the ratio between the central angle to the whole circle, which is 360, same as the ratio between the sector area compared to the whole circle area. So since we have equivalent ratios, we just set up as a proportion. Then whenever you see the two fractions on the two sides, so it's easily to think we might need to use cross multiplication to solve this kind of equation, right? So now let's get to the first question. Again, similar to the arc length videos, I just make a two formulas on the top, so it's always easy for you to make the reference and you can see which one we are using. So the first one, the picture is given. We need to find the shaded region, which is actually a piece of pie, so a sector area. And we also mentioned we need to round the answer to the nearest 100. So since we need to find a sector area, so we are going to use the first one. Is very straightforward. We just plug in the value. So the first one, since area of shaded region equals, so this is central angle over 360. In this case, central angle, which is 75 over 360 degree, times pi, and r is 10 inches, is already given. So now I'm going to type everything again. I want to remind you two things. First, you don't need to break down to find out the fraction, then multiply the pi, then multiply this. You can just type everything in the calculator you use, either online calculator, or if you do have this kind of calculator, which is perfect, you can use that. Second, do not replace pi as 3.14 unless the question tells you directly about that information. If you didn't see any information about that, don't change pi as 3.14. If you change it, you might make mistake for the rounding error, so do not change it. So I'm going to type everything together is 75 divided by 360 and times, we have pi here, so I just look for this pi, which is second, this arrow. You can see the pi on the screen, times 10 square. Everything, check everything to make sure you have perfect equation, type it correctly, then go to enter. So as you can see, the answer is 65.4498. Now let's check the rounding part. The answer says we are going to round it to the nearest hundreds, which is we are going to keep the two digits here. So it's 44, but since the third number, which is 9, so greater than 5, round it up. So the answer is going to be this curly equation symbol, meaning approximately. So since we round it, it's going to be like this way. So it's 65.45. Again, next number is 9, we round it up. So, and also since the radius is inch, so the answer, the unit for this one is inches square for the area. Okay, so that's the first question. That's how do we use a formula. It's very straightforward, right? So just want to remind you again, do not change it to 3.14. Okay, next one. We have a circle O here and we have a radius 9. And also we know the central angle, angle AOC label on the graph, which is 120 degree. So what we are looking for the area of shaded region. So remember, this time the shaded region is in the other side compared to the central angle. And also this time the answer is in terms of pi. So later we'll tell you how to deal with in terms of pi. let's figure out. Since we still need to look for the area of the shaded region, so I'm still going to use the first one because it's very straightforward. And also this time we're going to look for, again, we need to find a central angle over 360. Some student might say, oh, since central angle is 120, so I just use this one directly. Be careful. Why? Because the shaded region, let me use a different color, is this side. So if we want to look for this one, we need to figure out what is the central angle matching to this part, right? So apparently 120 is in the opposite side. This is not what we are going to use. But we also know the whole circle, which is 360. So we are going to use 360 minus 120, which is 240 degree. So that means this should be the central angle we use because it matches this region. So it's 240 degree divided by 360. Then times pi times r, which is 9 square. Do not forget the square. So now I'm going to type everything in the calculator. So I'm going to type 240 divided by 360. However, this time I'm not going to use pi. Why? Because the answer says, I'm going to use a red one to remind us, in terms of pi. So meaning I'm going to keep the pi in the end. So I'm not going to type the pi in the calculator. Otherwise, the calculator will do the calculation with 3.14 whatsoever, the long decimals there. So this is not what we want. So I'm going to keep everything except pi. So it's 240 divided by 360 times 9 squared. Check everything again. Again, since we don't use pi, so I'm going to keep the answer like that. So this is 54. The answer is 54 pi. So that's it. That's our answer. Again, I want to remind you, do not forget, if the answer says in terms of pi, do not type pi in the calculator. Also, sometimes students do remember didn't put the pi in the calculator, but when they put the answer, they just write down 54, which is wrong. In terms of pi, even we didn't put the pi in the calculator, this is still part of our answer. Okay, so that's one question. Now let's move on to the very last question here. So this question says, we do know the central angle, which is 110 degree. And this time, very interesting, we already know the area of the shaded region, which is 44 pi. This time, we are looking for the radius. So as I said, when we know the area, but we are looking for either central angle or a radius, different measurement. So it's actually choosing second method is much more easier. So now let's see how do we set it up. So if we're using this one, we check, okay, this central angle matching this shaded region. So we are going to just substitute the value 110 divided by 360 equals, and this time the sector area, which is already given, 44 pi divided by pi r squared. We don't know the radius, so we just set up this r, so it's pi r squared. Okay, now you might think, oh, are we going to use cross multiplication? Yes, you are correct. We do, but before that, my way is always to simplify every single step as much as you can. So you don't need to deal with a lot of, multiplication or fractions or whatsoever. So before we move on, let's check. We have pi over pi here, so I'm going to cancel this. So we don't need to deal with pi here. And if you want to simplify this side, go ahead, you can. But let's just, for example, some students forget to simplify, want to use cross multiplication, go ahead. So it's going to be this side times this one. Remember, pi is already canceled. There's no pi anymore. So left side is 110 r squared. Remember, after use cross multiplication, there's no more fractions. Sometimes students still put a fraction, so that's kind of confusing stuff. So it's 360 times 44. And if you want to find out this answer, go ahead. But since we know, in order to solve r squared, I'm going to divide it by 110 for both sides. So let's figure out this one. So 360, so if you want to, times 360 times 44 before that, go ahead. I just prefer to put everything together and then divide by 110. Okay, this answer is 144. Some student might say, oh, I find it, the radius 144. If you stop here, you made a mistake. Why? Because this is r square, meaning in order to find r, we need to find the square root before two sides. So before you end up here, you remember, you need to find a square root. So I'm going to find square root, which is here. As you can see, a little blue here is 144, which is 12. So it's not 144, it's actually 12. Okay, so that's one thing I want to remind you. When we find the radius, do not forget we need to find the square root as the last step, because here we only get the value for r squared. Of course, if you're looking for central angle, still using this way, but make sure you substitute the value in the right places and always check if you can simplify or not. Okay, so that's all the example I want to share with you today. I hope these videos are helpful. These videos are helpful, and also if you want to revisit, just always pause or just rewatch the video of this example to make sure you totally master this topic, okay? Thank you so much for watching this video, and take care, everyone.